you know, my work takes me to many places beyond Sydney, and so I don't spend enough time here at the moment. But I want you to know that my thoughts and prayers are right here with you every Sabbath afternoon. And we serve a wonderful God, a wonderful Savior, and we're looking forward to meeting Him face to face soon. And it's wonderful that we can support each other and pray for one another as we wait for that day. Have you ever got impatient when God doesn't answer your prayers the way you think He should? You know, sometimes things happen in our lives when we feel that we know the best thing to happen. And so we pray to God to answer our prayers in the way that we think He should act, that He should answer. And sometimes when He doesn't answer our prayers exactly as we envisaged, we get impatient. Sometimes we even get angry. If you've ever had an experience like that, you will relate to our Bible passage today. If you've got your Bibles, turn with me to Mark's Gospel. Mark, the 5th chapter. If you have your Bibles, Mark chapter 5. And we are going to start reading at verse 21. Now, if you don't have a Bible, never mind. You can follow with me on the text. So I'm going to share this passage. We're going to follow it through together. And then we are going to unpack it together. Let's start. Mark chapter 5 and verse 21. Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to Him, and He was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. And when he saw Him, he fell at His feet and begged Him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live." So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed Him and thronged Him. Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years, and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind Him in the crowd and touched His garment. For she said, "If only I may touch His clothes, I shall be made well." And immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up. And she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus, immediately knowing in Himself that power had gone out of Him, turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" But His disciples said to Him, "You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" And He looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before Him and told the whole truth. And He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." And while He was still speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, He said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid, only believe." And He permitted no one to follow Him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Then He came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and saw a tumult and those who wept and wailed loudly. And when He came in, He said to them, "Why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they ridiculed Him. But when He had put them all outside, He took the father and the mother of the child and those who were with Him and entered where the child was lying. Then He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cumi," which is translated, "Little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age. And they were overcome with great amazement. But he commanded them strictly that no one should know it, and said that something should be given her to eat. Among all the stories of the ministry of Jesus, none is more beautiful than this one. It tells the story of two sorrowful individuals who found their way to Jesus and were comforted. And although there are two people, it's actually one story. While Jesus was on his way to the house of Jairus, the woman came to him, and from the viewpoint of Jairus, she hindered Jesus, she delayed Jesus, she caused him to wait. But from the standpoint of Jesus, she provided him an opportunity to help Jairus. And so, friends, picture the scene. It's early in the morning. Jesus is coming by boat. And before he even arrives, before he gets on shore, there's a huge crowd of people waiting for Jesus. And they're waiting expectantly because they are wondering, what is he going to say today? What are we going to see him do today? Imagine they just wanted to be near Jesus, to hear what he had to say and to see what he was going to do. And as Jesus steps onto the shore, as he steps off the boat onto the shore, immediately he's surrounded by a massive crowd of people. All excited, all expectant, all waiting. And then through that crowd, Jairus comes to Jesus. Now, he's a big deal. And so the people make way, they part, the crowd parts, and Jairus comes. He falls down before Jesus, and his first three words are, "My little daughter." My little daughter. She's 12 years old. 12 years of sunshine in that home. Luke, who also tells the story, by the way, all the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they all tell this story. And Luke tells us that she was an only daughter. And then comes the pain, the heartache. As he says, my little daughter, she's at the point of death. She's dying. Please, come and help her. You are our last resort. We can feel the anguish, that father's despair. Can we really see Jairus this afternoon? How many of us know and understand this parental love? You know, parental love, a father or a mother's love for their child, has unique qualities. It's a love like no other. And we know what extent parents will go to care for their children. They'll do anything. It's a deeper love. It's a fuller love. It's a more far-reaching love than any other love. The Bible tells us next, it just says that Jesus went with him. When Jesus heard the plea of that father, he just said, let's go. Jesus went with him. And you can imagine Jairus as Jesus begins to follow him, and there's a massive crowd there, and Jairus is trying to get the people out of the way so Jesus can get to his daughter in time. He sets out to hurry Jesus through that crowd. Can you picture the scene? There's a massive crowd there and there's an emergency. They had no sirens in those days. But Jesus is being led by Jairus, and Jairus is trying to get the people out of the way, and he's trying to get Jesus there as quickly as he can. And then Jesus waits, he stops. The woman had touched him. Can you imagine Jairus? Don't stop, please. She's at the point of death. If we don't get there in a hurry, it'll be too late. He's impatient. And then Jesus asked the question, who touched me? And remember the disciples? What sort of a dumb question is that? They're incredulous. And I can imagine them thinking, the real question should be, who hasn't touched me? All these people are thronging you, Jesus. They're all touching you. And you asked, who touched you? I want you to consider this woman this afternoon. Because here is deep despair. She'd suffered with a flow of blood for 12 years. The Old King James Version calls it an issue of blood. For 12 years, she suffered. And the Bible tells us that she spent all her money, everything she had, and she was no worse off. So consider her predicament, my friend. Consider her deep despair. She's lost her health. And she's lost all her money. Gone. She's in deep trouble. Women back in that age, there were three great things in a woman's life: her home, society, and her religion. That's what was important. But to understand her predicament, we need to go back to the Mosaic laws in the book of Leviticus, chapter 15. And I'm going to read verse 19. Because, friends, this is a woman in deep trouble. Huge problem. And to understand it, we've got to read here from Leviticus. Notice what it says here. If a woman has a discharge, and the discharge from her body is blood, she shall be set apart 7 days, and whoever touches her shall be what? Shall be unclean until evening. Now notice, friends, as it goes on. If a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, other than at the time of a customary impurity, or if it runs beyond her usual time of impurity, listen to this. All the days of her unclean discharge shall be as the days of her customary impurity. She shall be what? Unclean. How long had she had this flow of blood? 12 years. 12 years. Being categorized as unclean. What that means, my friends, is this: that according to Jewish law, everything she touches is unclean. If she sits on a chair, on a lounge, on a bed, on a bench, it's unclean. If she touches a table, it's unclean. Everything she touches, it's unclean. And even worse, every body she touches is unclean. She can't hug her children. She can't shake hands with anyone. And so the the great things in a woman's life, she's lost them all. She can no longer stay at home because everything she touches in that home, it's unclean. Her family can no longer stay with her. Imagine she can't embrace her husband or hug her children. Society, no one will come near her. She can't go to church. And so she loses her home. She loses all her contacts in the community. And she loses her God. So consider a deep despair. She's already lost her health and her money. And now she loses her home, her family. She loses her friends. And she loses her church. And in her desperation, she comes to Jesus and she reaches out. I don't know how she did it. Because imagine how frail, losing her lifeblood, as it were, for 12 years. Imagine how anemic and unwell she must have been. But somehow she found the strength and the drive and the motivation, and she must have fought her way through that crowd, and she touches the hem of his garment. Why the hem of his garment? Why the hem of his garment? Let me read to you from Matthew. And when the men of that place, talking about Jesus, recognized him, they sent out into all that surrounding region and brought to him all who were sick. So no, Jesus is coming to town. The leaders of the community here. And they send a message out far and wide. Jesus is coming. Bring your sick. Bring your sick to town. Why? And begged him that they might only touch what? The hem of his garment. And as many as touched it were made perfectly well. She'd heard the news. And she was going to touch the hem of his garment. Mark's gospel tells us whenever he entered into villages, cities, or the country, they laid the sick in the marketplace and they begged him that they might just touch the border or the hem of his garment. And as many as touched him were made well. Now, what was the significance about the hem, the border of the garment? Why was it important? Well, again, friends, we go back to the early books of Scripture, and I'm going to read from the book of Numbers. Listen to what Scripture tells us. Again, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a blue thread in the tassels of the corners. And you shall have the tassel, that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them, and that you may remember and do my holy commandments and be holy for your God." And so the Jews had these garments or gowns. They called it a talit. And the tassels were called tzitzit. I'm sure there's another pronunciation, Baron, wherever you are. But that's how I pronounce it in English. All right? I'm sure the Hebrews had another pronunciation, but that's how you spell it. And they made these gowns that they wore, a cloak. And it had tassels on the hem of the garment that were called tzitzit in fulfillment of this biblical commandment. And so what was the significance of the hem or the border or the tassel on the garment? Well, simply this, friends. It symbolized that tassel. It symbolized obedience. It symbolized holiness. It symbolized purity and righteousness. And this woman, in her desperation, she reaches out and she touches the tassels the hem, the border of his garment. And she's healed. She's healed. She's cleansed. She's made whole. This woman who has been suffering unbearable punishment and torture and pain and agony for 12 years, she reaches out and she touches the tassel and she's healed. Christ's purity covers her impurity. And Christ's righteousness covers her unrighteousness. His holiness is given to her. And all that she has lost in that one moment is restored. Her health. She can now return to a home and family. She can meet with her friends again. She can go to church. And so as this woman reaches out in her desperate state, as she reaches out and she touches Jesus, Jesus waits. He stops. This woman had touched him. Jairus, come on, Jesus. Come on. My daughter's at the point of death. Please don't wait. Jairus is impatient. And then Jesus asks, well, who touched me? And the disciples remember, you ask who touched you? Are you serious? Look at all these people around you. And then the Bible tells us, but the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him. And how much of the truth did she tell him? The whole truth, my friends. 12 years of truth. Can you imagine Jairus? Hey, please. And she just tells the story. 12 years of suffering. 12 years of agony. 12 years of isolation. She tells the lot. She tells the lot. The whole truth. She doesn't leave one item out. She just unloads the lot. And Jairus is standing there. Please, let's go. And Jesus waits. And he listens to every last word. And after she had shared the whole truth, he then says the most beautiful thing. He says, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed. Now listen, friends. This woman, she's a nobody. She's a nobody. She's living on the fringes of society. The Bible doesn't even give her name. She's living on the fringes of society. She's an outcast. We don't even know her name. She's a nobody. But Jesus calls her daughter. Jesus calls her daughter. Friends, you notice what happens? She's not only healed, she's not only restored, but now she has a relationship with Jesus and she's part of his family. Because she's covered by his righteousness. She's made whole. She's alive again. But friends, here's the flip side. While Jesus calls her daughter, and while he's giving her life and welcoming her into his family, Jairus is desperate about his daughter who is losing her life. So why did Jesus stop? Why did he wait? It wasn't for the woman's sake, because she was already healed. Correct? She touched the garment. She touched the tassel. So Jesus didn't stop for her. He stopped for Jairus' sake. You see, friends, Jesus already knew that at the house of Jairus, that little girl lay dead. He knew the messengers were preparing to tell Jairus this terrible, terrible news. And he knew the suffering and the pain that Jairus was about to experience as the messengers came and told him the terrible news. Jesus stopped for Jairus. You see, friends, Jesus waited in order to lead Jairus to an attitude where it would be possible for him to believe, even when the news came that it was too late, that his daughter was dead. So picture the scene, friends. Jesus is on his way to the house of Jairus to heal his daughter. And on the way, he heals a woman who's been sick for 12 years. And he says to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." What is faith? What's another, not a theological, just let's talk about this in day-to-day terms. What does it mean to have faith in something? To what? To believe. To believe, to trust. And so Jesus says to this woman in the hearing of Jairus, who's impatient, and Jesus knows that soon he's going to get this terrible, terrible news, this crushing news that his daughter is dead. So Jesus wants to prepare Jairus. And so he says to the woman, while Jairus is impatient but listening, he says, "Daughter, your faith, your belief, it's made you well. Go in peace." And while Jesus is saying to this woman, "Daughter, your faith has made you well, go in peace," the messengers come to Jairus and they say, "Jairus, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the master? Why trouble the teacher any further?" And then Jesus turns to Jairus and he says what many would have thought the most inappropriate thing. He says, "Jairus, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Only believe." What a weird thing to say to someone who has just lost his only daughter. Don't be afraid. Only believe. How could Jairus possibly believe what Jesus said? On what basis could he believe? Well, right there beside him was the woman. The woman. And something remarkable had happened to her. There was the evidence right there beside him. There was the evidence. There was the reason to believe. He'd seen it with his own eyes. And so when Jesus said to the woman, "Daughter, your faith or your belief has made you whole, go in peace," now he says to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just believe." Like the woman. The woman who was just being healed of 12 years of agony and suffering. And just believe. You see, friends, there was a method, a purpose in Jesus waiting, stopping. There's always a meaning in his delay. Oh yes, we get impatient when he doesn't answer our prayers the way we think he should. But you know, friends, That's human. It's human to say, this is the way it's got to be done. I know. But when we say that, we're actually saying we know more than God. We know better than God. And so he delays, and friends, out of the delay comes help. Out of the darkness comes light. It's always so with Jesus. All we must do is believe. The King James Version, as I mentioned earlier, I want to read you what it says. And a certain woman which had an issue of blood, 12 years, came in the press behind and touched his garment. You notice it says she had an issue of blood. I know there are many of us here today who have issues. Not an issue of blood, but we have issues that we are struggling with, that we are dealing with. Issues that are often about to crush us. My friend, you might be facing an issue at work, a difficulty, a challenge, and you might know how to deal with it. You might be facing an issue at home, your relationships, your family situation. You might be facing issues there. You might be facing health issues. You might be facing spiritual issues. My friend, take courage. Whatever issue you are facing, God is able to help. If you'll but reach out in faith and touch the tassel on his garment, he will stop whatever he's doing as he runs this universe, as he keeps the planets spinning in space, as he keeps things happening as they should in this vast universe. If you'll touch the tassel of his garment, he'll stop. And he'll hear your whole story. And he will say to you, son, daughter, go in peace. I'm making you well. He can solve any issue, any problem. My friends, we serve a wonderful Jesus who's prepared to wait. And even though in our struggle we might take a long time to tell the whole story, he stops and he waits because he's got time for you. You are his son. You are his daughter. And one day soon, he's coming back to take you home, to live with his family forever. May God bless you.